you. Well, thank you very much for that warm welcome. Mrs. Rajavi, all of you in the Iranian resistance movement, I can't tell you what an inspiration and an honor it is to be with you today. You're giving your commitments, your funding, and risking your lives on the outside on behalf of the millions of Iranians still in Iran who thirst for freedom. What a powerful statement this organization is making today. And I agree that it is in support of Iran uprising, because that's what we need. And I'm very honored to be here with my friends on the front row, Senator Brownback, Senator Torricelli, Governor Ambassador Gary Locke. Thank you. Iran has always been a central concern for the United States. And today, we're living in historic times, times of potentially great changes, and Iran is going to become even more important for the United States. So let me tell you the story very quickly. At the end of World War II, the United States set up with the Allies what it believed would be a stable international order. We had the United Nations, we had the International Monetary Fund. We even considered giving our nuclear weapons to the United Nations. But it was only 2 years later that we realized it was all premature, because that's when we recognized that we were in a struggle for very existence against the Soviet Union and Marxism-Leninism. That was the first inflection point. There was civil war in China, communist takeovers of governments in Eastern Europe, civil war in Greece, a North Korean invasion of South Korea. We formed NATO. The Middle East and South Asia were roiled by conflict and change. Israel fought its neighbors. Monarchies struggled in the Gulf. And the Pahlavi family was there in Iran. The Soviet Union began its long campaign to create and foster terrorism against the West in Europe and the Middle East. Oil became the strategic commodity, and the Soviet Union, the communists, had to be kept away from the Persian Gulf. They had to be. Well, it was Britain's job first, but Britain pulled back in 1971. And then the United States relied on the two pillars, Saudi Arabia and Iran. But with Iran, despite U.S. assistance and many of my friends who served there during the 1970s, there were problems. You see, the Shah of Iran had another agenda. His agenda wasn't freedom, democracy, and blocking communism. It was just a little bit different. He sought empire, personal aggrandizement. He took the lead within the newly formed Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. He pressed for continuing hikes in the price of oil. He used that money in his thirst for modern weaponry from the United States, like the F-14 fighters. He envisioned a defense budget and forces in excess not only of what he could afford, but what was actually required. It seemed that each year he pressed for higher oil prices, more weapons, and at home, greater repression as he diverted critically needed resources to plans for possible aggression against his neighbors in the Gulf. By 1977-78, the Shah's megalomania, repressive policies at home, and erratic foreign policies convinced the U.S. government to pull back its support. And in the face of rising popular Iranian discontent, a U.S. general was actually sent to encourage the U.S.-backed Iranian military to remain non-political. There was hope for a democratic transition in Iran, and then it all collapsed as a radical cleric returned from France, seized control with a fundamentalist agenda, and for the past 44 years has waged a strongly anti-American campaign for regional hegemony built on tyrannical repression at home and terrorism abroad. That's got to end. That has to be ended. For the people of Iran, who long for freedom and democratic rule, there's been no relief. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, and it seemed like there was no more threat of communism. The U.S. emerged as a sole superpower. We sought to be a global force for peace and stability. We promoted human rights. We helped China lift its billion people from poverty. We viewed ourselves as a benign and indispensable power. But the terrorist strike on 9/11 shattered America's sense of security. We struck back at Afghanistan and then at Iraq as a mistake. We didn't appreciate that it was actually Iraq which had helped keep Iran's terrorist hegemonial aspirations in check, and that it was actually the Ayatollahs in Iran that were the real enemy. Your organization, the MEC, was caught in the middle of this. For years, you resisted the Ayatollah from bases in Iraq, and then you got caught in the conflict between Saddam and the United States, and it took more years to clarify this. Now you're established in Albania, safely established there, and you're a vital force for freedom and democracy, and not only in Iran. You're an example, a living example around the world. But now, some 20 years after the United States struck at Saddam, we in the United States are facing new challenges. The emergence of near-peer competitors, China and Russia, challenging U.S. leadership and the very principles of democracy and self-rule, which you are struggling for. You see, we did a great job at promoting and extolling democracy, we in the United States. Now, we didn't always succeed in helping people. We haven't succeeded in helping you enough yet, in my view. But these ideas, freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of conscience, free access to information, the right to choose one's own leaders, to dress and behave as one chooses, with respect for others, of course, to shape the laws under which we live. These freedoms are like a powerful, benign, infectious virus. People catch it. They get it. They want it. It's universal across mankind. It spells real trouble for dictators and autocrats everywhere. And that's precisely why we're in this position today. Neither Putin's Russia nor Xi's China can tolerate independence of thought, freedom as we know it in the West. Of course, neither can the Ayatollahs, and that's what this organization is all about. So it seems we're moving toward a new phase in the global struggle for the future of mankind. And will it be democracy that triumphs? Or will we descend into a new dark age of repression, of dictatorship, of rule by single men, single families? There's already war. As Vice President Pence mentioned, in February 2022, Russia launched the largest military action since World War II. So many of my colleagues were mystified by this. Why, they said there's no reason to have tanks anymore. Hey, the war is going to be fought against terrorists. Yeah, it's true. The terrorists are still there. But this is real industrial age warfare going on in Ukraine. His unprovoked invasion is a monstrous crime. It's resulted in millions of refugees, hundreds of thousands of casualties, a global food crisis, and $1 trillion of damage, and that's just the beginning. It's not over. Russia is using this war in Ukraine to forge a set of allies against the West. China is joined with Russia diplomatically, economically, and perhaps militarily. And so is the Iranian government of the Ayatollahs. Can you imagine that? They signed a strategic agreement with Russia last year. They're providing drones, ammunition, trainers. There are Iranians in Crimea assisting in this unprovoked aggression against the Ukrainian people. And they're trying to get advanced Russian aircraft and air defenses. Maybe they're going to build a factory. They're talking about supplying ballistic missiles. And of course, the Ayatollah's nuclear weapons program is advancing. This cannot stand. Now, it's true, the United States did try to regain or to gain Iran's commitment to this joint comprehensive program of action that would rein in the nuclear program. And it was canceled, and the United States has tried again to regain it. That's unsuccessful. I think it's essentially dead. And with it, I believe, is dying the policy of accommodating the Ayatollah's regime. The Ayatollahs have placed Iran in the crosshairs of danger. The U.S. tightening sanctions, overwatching, Israel confronting the grim reality of a strike on Iran's nuclear assets. This prolonged period of regional ambiguity, of Western striving and failing to check the Ayatollah's ambitions, I believe is coming to an end. But it shouldn't take Israeli bombs to bring it to an end. That's the wrong way. The right way is the people of Iran standing up. You in the Iranian diaspora can sense it. You dream of reconnecting with your homeland, returning home, and you in the MEC can sense the growing opportunity to triumph, to replace that repressive Ayatollah's regime. You can feel it. The revolution is already underway. Step by step, with popular protests growing, determined, a popular democratic secular program announced and offered in 100 different channels by Mrs. Rajavi, courageous student leaders who are challenging the powers of repression today, just as they did 50 years ago under the Shah. Yes, it seems inexorable now. The Ayatollahs will pass. And this transformation of Iran is sparked by and built upon the greatest revolution of the 21st century, the power, the leadership, the courage, the wisdom of women. Now, history shows that regimes are brought down not only by popular resistance, but also by the collapse of will within the regime itself. These demonstrations are so powerful, and they're growing, and surely the families, the relatives, the fathers, the mothers, the children of those people working for the regime, they must see the injustice. They must see the immorality. They must see the futility of going against the Iranian people's quest for a true democracy. Won't they persuade their husbands, sons, and fathers to show courage, to withdraw their support, their tolerance for this corrupt regime? They should rip off their uniforms and rally with the people, shouldn't they? I have no doubt that will happen. Now, will the populace throw off their insecurities, the strict interpretations, the legacies of past fears? Will they face the uncertainties of freedom? After all, in the United States, we're still calling it our democratic experiment 250 years later, to prove that people can govern themselves. They don't need a dictator, a monarch, or a tyrant. You must take the lead in this. We don't know what's to come. Is it just a popular upheaval? Will the Ayatollahs and autocrats flee to Russia like they did in Ukraine in 2014? Or will there be a civil war, wreaking destruction and adding to the human misery? We just don't know. But we can only believe that this organization is at the very heart of Iran's future. Your decades of resistance, sacrifice, steadfast determination, courage, persistence, I think it's unique in scale in modern times. There's never been anything like this in our understanding of modern human history. But here's the challenge. After this revolution, will you blossom into a new structure for a peaceful Iran, open to human imagination, even as you provide the foundations for a new government? Will you rally the technocrats, the fence-sitters, the still uncommitted, the fearful millions into a new system that's been so skillfully articulated, but's not yet been tested by the fires of fear and revenge? Will you be able to provide both the justice and the forgiveness to heal a great civilization? Will you bring its former enemies, your former enemies, to regrets and repentance? Will you meet the needs and wishes of all the citizens of Iran? I believe the answers to these questions are in Mrs. Rajavi's 10-point plan. Last summer, I visited Ashraf. I met with regime survivors, members of the resistance. These are strong, smart people, full of fight, determination. They've overcome so much. They shared their stories with me. They showed me the pictures. I got to see some of the atrocities on a level I wasn't expecting, honestly. It's one of the most moving experiences of my life. And I just wish that every leader in the U.S. government, I wish every American could have that experience to feel what has happened in Iran under the regime of the Ayatollahs. Believe me, If every American saw this and felt this, that regime wouldn't last another 10 minutes. There's so much to be done. And even as this revolution emerges from the protests, you've got such major work. And there'll be crises, there'll be conflict. You'll be called on in ways you can't foresee right now. You've got to have courage, perseverance, wisdom. You've got to deal with these challenges the right way. But you're driving toward a glorious vision, a new Iran, embraced by the world, a full and leading member of the region, with acceptance and leadership in international institutions, working together in harmony with neighboring states, living, embodying the universal values of freedom, respect, security, prosperity for all. And as you strive for this, you're also helping all of us in this great challenge. Because as humankind chooses between democracy and autocracy, between repression and freedom, you are leading the way. We thank you, we salute you, and I just want to say that surely, after your decades of struggle and sacrifice for the heart and soul of Iran, the best is yet to come. Thank you.